Hey, May 40 here. I've been reading this fascinating book by Roddy Goldman, Conservative Claims of Cultural Oppression, the Nature and Origins of Conservaphobia. And he talks a great deal about how people on the left just love to educate. They just want to help us get our lives more orderly, all right? This doesn't just express itself in hostility to the free market, but the left wants to extend their education to every sphere of life, right? So Laura Ingram says, parents would be disturbed to know that it is common practice among pediatricians these days to tell the mums and dads to leave the room so the professional can have private chats with children, chats that involve controversial topics like abortion, premarital sex, masturbation, and birth control. Leave it. Experts, guys. Mum and dad need to leave the room so that these things can be left in the hands of the experts. All right, let's go to Tucker Carlson.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight, the most important thing to keep in mind in a period of intense change is that things are in fact changing. Things weren't always this way. So memory, history is your best defense against manipulation. When you remember the way things were, you can fight to preserve them. When you no longer remember it was always this way, then you're at their mercy. So with that in mind, it's worth remembering that 100 years ago, Memphis was one of the richest, best organized cities in the country. It had a booming economy. It had beautiful municipal parks, a lot of them, more than 100. It had one of the most modern sanitation systems in the world, something we take for granted now. But when yellow fever was real, no one took it for granted. Memphis was such a big deal that it, in fact, was the informal capital of an entire American region, the Mississippi Delta. But not anymore. In fact, by last year, if you went to Memphis, it was hard to believe that any of that had ever been true at any point, because by that point and now, Memphis had become a husk and a highly threatening one. In 2021, according to federal statistics, Memphis, Tennessee was the most dangerous city in the United States. Last year, it recorded a total of 342 murders. Now, how many is that? Well, by comparison, San Antonio, Texas, which has more than twice the population, recorded fewer than half as many murders. So by any measure at all, Memphis was absolutely falling apart. But Liza Fletcher decided to make a life there anyway. After graduating from college, Fletcher moved back to Memphis. Both sides of her family had lived there for more than 100 years. She married a man she'd met in church. He grew up there too, and they had 2 little boys. She began teaching pre-kindergarten at a local girls' school. Here's a video that she made for her students at the beginning of the COVID lockdowns. It's only 15 seconds long, but you can tell immediately what sort of person Liza Fletcher was.
Hey girls, it's Miss Fletcher. I miss all of you so much. I'm just at home with my kids, missing you guys, wishing we were back at St. Mary's, but I wanted to touch base and say, hey.
Hey girls, it's Mrs. Fletcher. I miss you so much. So every year on their wedding anniversary, Liza Fletcher's husband wrote her a love note on Instagram. Reading them now will make you cry. But you can see why he felt that way. Her warmth and her decency shine through. Meanwhile in Memphis, 7 miles across the city, lived a man called Cleotha Abston. Like Liza Fletcher, Abston also grew up in the city of Memphis, but he could not have been a more different sort of person. Judging from his long public record, Cleotha Abston devoted his life to preying on people weaker than he was. Cleotha Abston was a predator. He was an evil man. At a young age, Abston was arrested for, among many, many other things, stealing, aggravated assault, weapons charges, carjacking, and rape. In 2000, he was convicted of kidnapping a local attorney at gunpoint downtown and forcing him into the trunk of his own car. Crimes like that are now common in Memphis. Last year, the city reported more than 100 kidnappings. But like most lifelong criminals, Cleotha Abston was never fully punished for what he did. He was released years before the end of his prison sentence. Nor was he in any way sense reformed by his experience behind bars. Abston was well known in his apartment complex as of last week for his sexual aggression and his perversity. He terrified his neighbors. But no one from any part of the justice system seems to have intervened. Early last Friday morning, Liza Fletcher and Cleotha Abston met for the first and last time. As her husband and 2 young children slept at home, Liza Fletcher went for an early morning run through her neighborhood. Cleotha Abston followed her, stalking her every move from a black SUV. According to the indictment, as Fletcher jogged by, Abston leapt out, beat her bloody, smashed her cell phone, then dragged her into his vehicle. Within an hour, Liza Fletcher was dead. She'd been sexually assaulted and murdered. Police arrested Abston soon after based on surveillance video, but he refused to say what had happened to Liza Fletcher. So her family waited in agony, but he didn't care. He never spoke. Yesterday, authorities finally found Liza Fletcher's body. She'd been thrown like garbage behind an abandoned building in a seedy part of town. The whole story could not be more shocking or more horrible. But here's what may be the scariest part. Some people didn't seem particularly shocked or horrified by it. In the hours after Liza Fletcher's disappearance, Biden voters on social media seemed to dismiss the crime on racial grounds. Why are we paying so much attention to the kidnapping of an attractive, privileged white woman? That's racist. Others seem to blame Fletcher for the atrocity committed against her. Why was she jogging at that hour anyway? In Memphis? Come on. The point they were making was clear. Everyone knows the rules. Liza Fletcher violated those rules. You can't go outside at certain hours in certain places in America, obviously. And if you violate the rules, you run the risk of being raped and murdered. That's how things work in this country. So adapt, accept it, move on. To some extent, if we're being honest, all of us feel that way. Whether we articulate it or not, we know what the rules are. We know what we can and cannot do in modern America. Nothing is ever spelled out. Nothing can be spelled out at risk of punishment. But everyone knows what the parameters are. Cities like Memphis or Baltimore or Detroit or Montgomery or Gary, Indiana or Wilmington, Delaware or a dozen other formerly prosperous, orderly little cities across the country were destroyed forever by the rioting that accompanied our last progressive social revolution more than 50 years ago. Politicized criminals started breaking things, torching buildings, stealing, and immediately anyone with a decent job just left. They pulled their kids out of school, sold the house or not, didn't matter, and they split for somewhere else. And mostly they have never come back. That is true not simply in Memphis, but in places all over the country. So it seems a little weird to a lot of people when someone like Liza Fletcher, someone who could live anywhere, voluntarily moves back to a place like Memphis. Not to some suburb of Memphis, but to the city of Memphis. That seems weird to people. But it's not weird. It's not odd at all when you think about it. Liza Fletcher was from Memphis. She grew up there, and she had a right to come back. This was her country, too, just as it's your country, too. An American citizen should be able to live or walk anywhere in America without being raped or murdered for it, period. That is the baseline requirement for civilization. It's called order. But increasingly, that is not what we have. What we have is a country where you just can't go some places. You're not wanted there, and it's too dangerous for you to go. Most people accept this by default, but we should never accept this under any circumstances. To accept something is to concede that it is more or less normal. Once we acknowledge something as normal, whether it's children being castrated in the name of trans rights or women being murdered by rapists who should have been in prison but weren't because equity, once we accept that as normal, we are stuck with it forever. It is the new status quo. It will never change except to get worse. The good people who lived in Memphis a century ago would never believe what has happened to the city they built. They would weep if they saw it. That will be the experience of every American before long. Our entire country will be Memphis if we don't put a stop to this insanity right now with as much force as is required. So Joe Biden gave the most threatening presidential speech in American history last week. He spoke in front of a blood-red backdrop flanked by U.S. Marines, and he delivered, if you take a step back, the blueprint for the rest of his administration. Criminalize dissent, effectively ban the opposition, and use the federal agencies to transform America into a one-party state. It's called authoritarianism. Here's what Biden said in a speech the White House advertised as non-political. Watch this.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. The Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And that is a threat to this country. MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law. They do not recognize the will of the people. They refuse to accept the results of a free election. They promote authoritarian leaders, and they fan the flames of political violence that are a threat to our personal rights, to the pursuit of justice, to the rule of law, to the very soul of this country.
It's enough to make your head spin. Donald Trump has been banned from speaking in public. He has been censored at the behest of the Democratic Party. He can no longer go on social media, our electronic town square. He's been totally erased. And yet, Joe Biden says, Trump and his supporters promote authoritarian leaders. And he says this at exactly the moment that he is sending billions of dollars to Ukraine and its authoritarian leaders every month. Authoritarian? Oh, that just scratches the surface. Over the past year and a half, the government of Ukraine has jailed its top political rival. It has banned opposition parties, and it has outlawed independent media. Oh, but that's not authoritarian. What's authoritarian is disagreeing with Joe Biden. Do that, and Joe Biden will stand in front of the military he controls and declare that you were an enemy of the state. So watching the fanatical support of the White House for the actual authoritarians who run Ukraine, you can sort of see the template here. But of course, as is always true when Joe Biden speaks, you can't hold him entirely responsible because not only did he not write the words, he's not aware that he spoke them. Just the other day, he said, after giving the speech, when we're quoting, "I don't consider any Trump supporter a threat to the country." That was on Friday. Our media seem to ignore that. They'd be very disappointed if they heard it because they listened exactly to the words Biden spoke. And they love them. Watch.
President Biden gave a really strong speech, and I loved it. I believe everything he said.
It was an urgent wartime address.
And something else that really stuck out to me is that he almost seemed to sort of be reclaiming patriotism.
If you look up fascism in the dictionary, you're going to find all of those things. So I'm really not sure what the Republicans are all upset about other than the fact that it was named.
Obviously, Republicans, I think, are the biggest threat to democracy. We don't separate right-wing extremists and Republican Party anymore.
Hillary Clinton told the truth when she said that there were deplorable people in the Republican Party supporting Donald Trump, and he was exciting a lot of racism and misogyny and bigotry.
The Republicans who were like, "Oh, he's calling us fascist." If you're not a fascist, he's not talking about you. So lighten up.
Oh, so if you're innocent, you have nothing to hide. Don't worry. It's amazing how Soviet the whole thing is. Joe Biden calls for political purges and law enforcement crackdowns on his political opponents, and state media cheer him on. In a speech about the threats to our republic, Joe Biden doesn't mention anything but domestic threats. He doesn't mention China a single time. He didn't mention the border or fentanyl or crime. He only mentioned people who oppose him politically. And once again, like the obedient little servants they are, our media cheer him on. You have to wonder about their views on authoritarianism. Obviously, they're for it. In fact, one of these journalists wrote the speech. That would be John Meacham, who wrote for many years at Newsweeklies and now is America's most banal historian. Apparently, he had a hand in writing the speech last week. He also redecorated the Oval Office at Joe Biden's request. He is now our propagandist in chief. And it's not hard to see what inspired Meacham to write that speech on Thursday. Meacham admires autocrats who silence their political opponents. Earlier this year, Meacham went on television to compare the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, to Winston Churchill and the men who stormed the beaches of Normandy. We want to prepare you now for a torrent of cliches because those are the only chunks of language John Meacham is capable of using. Now that you're prepared, here it is. Quote, "It may sound sentimental, but it has the virtue of being true." Right. So at the same time, Zelensky, this Winston Churchill figure, was criminalizing dissent in his country. He shut down 3 television stations. As his spokesman put it, those media have become one of the tools of war against Ukraine. So they are blocked in order to protect national security. Oh, so those TV stations are sort of like Donald Trump or Fox News. We need to silence them in order to preserve our democracy. Democracy, it was only one side gets to speak. So it really is democracy circa 1972 Bulgaria. It's a democratic republic, meaning the people who live there have no representation whatsoever. The party decides. It's hard to believe any of this is happening, but it is. And on Thursday, Joe Biden in his speechwriter made it explicit. So where's the pushback to this? No president's ever given a speech like this. So you wonder, where are those pious defenders of our norms? Joe Biden announces that we need a one-party state, and he says it flanked by active duty U.S. Marines, and nobody says a word?
Okay, wow, this is Tucker. Hyperbolic is understating it. So let's say hello to Dooovid. Dooovid, how's it going, man?
Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem. Okay, so extraordinary story out of Germany that you sent me. So what were some of the things that jumped out to you about this story about some Jews in Germany are concerned about the large number of non-Jews who are converting to Judaism, and in part to assuage guilt over having perhaps Nazi ancestors, a whole bunch of factors working into this. But what do you think of that story?
Yeah, I guess it was a 2016 book that was written in German, and so it was just an article in today's JTA that I saw and thought you'd find interesting. And I haven't seen the data, but it's not surprising. We could talk about some of the details, some of the history of conversion, and the social dynamics, and the role that conversion has in Judaism, where Jews in general feel that we should be the gatekeepers of who could enter, but it's not necessarily that way, and that's why conversion is one of the most contested issues within Judaism, Israeli law. 75 years, more than 70 years after the creation of Israel, the who is the Jew question remains unresolved.
Okay, and let me read some excerpts from this article here in JTA. Too many Germans converting to Judaism, the debate is roiling Germany's Jewish community. And so talks about this cantor, Avatar Gerstetter. And the first German-born female cantor is now persona non grata in her synagogue after she penned a column critical of conversion in Germany for a major non-Jewish newspaper. So some of the criticism she received is that she published this in a non-Jewish publication. So there's concern. We probably shouldn't be making this inter-Jewish dispute something that the Goyim are seeing. So she wrote a column called "Why the Increasing Number of Converts is a Problem for Judaism." She charges that too many people in Germany are converting for the wrong reasons, such as to atone for their family's Nazi past or to identify with the victims rather than the perpetrators. And she criticizes the fact that converts increasingly fill numerous Jewish leadership roles in Germany. Anything there you want to jump on, Dooovid?
Yes, I guess this is a popular cantor, and being a female cantor, it she's probably reform, voicing these complaints. So for the purpose of the JTA story, they give a lot of these comments regarding this one specific woman.
Okay, sorry, some technical issues here on my end. Let's try you again, Dooovid. You still there? Okay, hang on. Let me sort this out. Settings, sound. Okay, here we go. Okay, Dooovid, we should be able to hear you now.
Okay, yeah, great. Your mic had minor issues, but it sounds like it's better now. Yes, I guess there's two parts of the story. One is this complaint about this popular female cantor, and she's probably reformed being a female cantor. And then this book from a few years ago, and some of these details of conversion. So the history after the war, where you had mostly spouses of Jewish men who had married non-Jewish women, but it helped them survive during the war, to the phenomenon that self-hating Germans don't want to identify with being German, and I guess to some extent, to resolve the dissonance, there's an aspect to becoming Jews, and then they take upon the victim complex, where they feel like, well, now that I'm a convert to Judaism, I could talk like a Jew who was persecuted, as opposed to the German that they are, that converted, and hence the complaint. And then obviously they mentioned later in the article about rising to positions of power, which me as a half Jew experienced that, and I mentioned that there in Metro Detroit all over is this concept that converts to Judaism can't have positions of power in the community, that you can't convert to Judaism and then become a leader among Jews. And I mean, to some extent you can, and many converts do become somewhat prominent, but then there's going to be the pushback from the community. It's like, we want to be led by Jews, not converts to Judaism. And then if you are a convert to Judaism, you're going to constantly have these these tests of your faith and your loyalty that to some extent are never ending.
Right, and this article talks about a book that was written on conversion to Judaism in Germany. Ironically, this book was written by a convert, and the book's called The Staging of Jewishness, and it's an examination of conversions to Judaism after 1945. And so it says that for most Jews who respond to prospective converts, the staging of Jewishness is secondary to questions of power, belonging, and authenticity. So immediately after World War II, German Gentiles seeking to convert usually did so on account of their Jewish partners. Today, most converts do it of their own accord. So like everything else, time and place just plays an enormous role here. It's not like there's just one monolithic path to conversion to Judaism. In different times, different places, under different circumstances, conversion is easier or more difficult. It is more encouraged or more discouraged. And obviously, Jews who survived in Germany during World War II because they had a non-Jewish spouse, right? There are hundreds of Jews who survived in Germany during World War II because they had a non-Jewish spouse. It completely makes sense why the Jewish community would want to welcome them. And the article points out that there wasn't any formal rabbinic conversion process for about 15 years after World War II. The community would do it. So I notice so many people think, oh, conversion, it has to be done by 3 rabbis, and you go to a weekly conversion class, and there are all these steps that you have to take. But like everything else, that's contingent. It changes with time and place. So for the first 15 years after World War II, conversion was done by the community. It wasn't done by the rabbis. There's nothing that only a rabbi can do in Judaism. So everything that you think is exclusive to rabbis, just not true. In certain times, certain places, it may be exclusive to rabbis, but there's no distinctive, powerful prerogatives inherent in being a rabbi. A learned lay Jew in different times, different places can do all the same things. Anything you want to add, Dooovid?
Yeah, I mean, presumably this article is referring mostly to Reform converts anyways, and it's not even referring to the right of return in Israel. And so a lot of this orthodoxy refers to specific Israel, and because there is a factual control of even to the Haredi or ultra-Orthodox control over conversion for Israeli citizenship and being accepted in Israel. And in America, there's the list of rabbis whose conversions aren't accepted. But the majority of conversions in America, I think over 90% of them, come from non-Orthodox rabbis. And I would assume also the case in Germany. And if you're trying to become part of an Orthodox community, or you just want the official, like, I'm a convert from the Orthodox, I'm accepted by Israel, and if you're accepted by the Orthodox, you're accepted by all Jews, which I said isn't necessarily the case, because it's somewhat like joining a club. And like you said from the article, there's board of directors, there's prominent Jews, and if you've been accepted into the Jewish community, finding a rabbi to rubber stamp it is relatively easy in the wider Jewish community. Especially if it's like keeping money Jewish, intermarriage in the Jewish community where a prominent member marries a non-Jew and they want to keep, say the money or power within the community, and corruption within Orthodoxy. So Orthodoxy, like there's going to be much more higher standards, but certainly within Orthodoxy, like Ivanka Trump never covering her hair, never doing many of what would be considered the mainstays of Orthodoxy. That very rarely do you hear Haredi Jews saying complaining about Ivanka not covering her hair, and she's obviously a very prominent person. So it's an interesting dynamic, and then also they don't mention in this article, but there's probably an element of colorism where generally Jews, especially like in marriage or conversion, prefer, God forbid, whiter people. And so, if Germans want to convert to Judaism, for example, it's illegal in Israel, it's illegal for Palestinians or people from certain nations there to convert to Judaism, period. Like there's no path to becoming Jewish if you're Palestinian. It's illegal under Israeli law, even if you marry a Jew. And like Eritreans, it's also illegal for Africans who illegally migrate into Israel to convert to Judaism. So even if you're, so to say, a true convert from that nation due to larger economic laws, that has a certain coloristic element to it, there's no path to conversion to Judaism. So presumably there's a lot more exceptions made for whiter people to convert to Judaism.
Right, and by the color element, we're not just talking about skin color. We're talking about what skin color represents. So it's not the brown skin that prevents Palestinians from converting to Judaism, because plenty of Ethiopian or darker people than Palestinians are converting to Orthodox Judaism. It's that they are Palestinians and there's a life and death struggle between Jews and Arabs. And when we talk about skin color in general, we're not talking about skin color. We're talking about skin color as a sign of certain generalizable traits. We recognize that in nature, as with human beings, that living creatures tend to be color-coded. So in nature, if you see a living creature who is bright red, that usually signals danger, right? And so nature color codes for our benefit. And so when we talk about skin color, what we're talking about are signs and symbols for a whole bunch of character traits that frequently are generalizable with skin color. So, for example, Jews tend to be much more comfortable with white people than with any other race. So let's have a look here. Just get an update here. Dooovid, just hang on. An update here on California.
California has something called renewables, and this is the future. How's that going to work? Well, just a few hours ago, California's grid operator delivered some stunning news. It issued an upgraded level 2 emergency alert. The grid operator is telling Californians to, quote, be ready for potential rotating power outages. Blackouts are expected tonight in our biggest state. The governor of California, Gavin Newsom, just released a video telling residents to do their part to protect the energy grid.
These triple-digit temperatures throughout much of our state are leading, not surprisingly, to record demand on the energy grid. Everyone has to do their part to help step up for just a few more days. And today and tomorrow afternoon, after 4 p.m., in particular 4 p.m., please turn your thermostat up to 78 degrees or higher and avoid, to the extent possible, using any really large appliances.
Oh, so you run the state into the ground, make it look like Guinea-Bissau, our richest state, is now our most dysfunctional state. You did that, Gavin Newsom. You and the one-party political machine in your state, but it's the residents' fault. Do your part. Don't use your appliances. This is insane. Well, and
So yeah, I have my portable air conditioner set at 60, but my room temperature is about 84 degrees right now. But Dooovid, what did you think about my point that it's not skin color as such that prevents people from converting to Judaism. It's skin color as a representative of other things.
Yeah, I mean, you could look at it, you could put it like that and say, if you look at nations that, generally Jews are prestigious people, and even Israel's doing pretty well. And the few nations that you would put higher than Israel are usually Northern European nations, which would be whiter nations. I mean, there is a certain colorism, skin color element to it. But I mean, the Israeli law would apply even if you were blonde-haired, blue-eyed Palestinian. It'd still be illegal for you to become a Jew. But there is a skin color, at least visual element to it. But you talk about standards of living, education standards, where Jews probably prefer to have elites convert. So someone like Ivanka Trump, people that have college educations, people that have prestige, and to some extent just being German, may be considered a step over being Jewish. And you could look at Jews generally try to get into white neighborhoods, not the other way around. Even Israelis, that Israelis generally try to more than come to Israel, try to leave Israel, and their prime destination is majority white areas. Probably like in LA, like where you're in one of the whiter areas, and the majority of the Jews would probably prefer to live, in the whiter parts of LA. But you want to put, white is just a correlate for other factors, so it's not necessarily like a racism, skin color. It could be, well, they prefer to live in the lower crime areas, the higher educated areas, the areas with more economic opportunity. But like here in Metro Detroit, the majority of people who want to convert to Judaism are blacks. It could just be demographic, and even Orthodox Judaism, the majority of people that apply or desire to convert to Orthodox Judaism are blacks. And it's possible or likely that blacks will have a harder time fitting in the Jewish community than white converts, and that the community makes it easier for whites to convert than blacks. And I think you've mentioned that, like in LA, Hispanics or whatever the case is, that there'll be certain communal factors. So, if you're looking at this way, that they've made it really easy for Germans to convert to Judaism, so much that you're complaining now that there's like a demographic threat of a sizable amount of German converts to Judaism, and they're taking over. They have positions of power in the community. Like, it's okay, there's a handful of African American converts, but none of them really have positions of power. I've never seen like an African American convert rise to be head of a Jewish organization. But in Germany, if you're having German converts, and obviously they're German citizens, there's maybe in Germany, if you're German, you feel a little bit more comfortable there than a Jew, and so they're rising to positions of power in the Jewish community. And then you're having a pushback, saying like, well, I know, there's obvious reasons why we're making it easier for Germans to convert to Judaism, but like, come on, we can't let them take over our community. We can't let them have have positions of leadership. We want to be led, so to say, by ethnic us.
Okay, so there's a comment in the chat that converts will always be outsiders, and along with everything else, that is contingent. So for example, I have lived in and around Beverly Hills since I moved to Los Angeles in 1994, so for about 28 years. I've lived in and around Beverly Hills. I've been going to the same synagogues for 28 years. I'm a very known quantity, and so I have the hechsher of some people. Like, I have their approval. And so for some communities and some people, I am far more of an insider than all sorts of born Jews who they either don't know very well or they don't feel comfortable with. So, yeah, all things being equal, people who are born Jewish are going to feel more comfortable with other people who are born Jewish, but all things aren't equal. So Jews also feel more comfortable with people who are at their approximate level of Jewish observance. They're also often more comfortable with people who are at their approximate level of Torah learning, or they feel more comfortable with people who've imbibed the norms, the rituals, the characteristics, the philosophies of a particular community. People feel more comfortable with those people who they've known for years and for decades. So it's not ipso facto the convert is always the outsider. If the convert is a valuable member of the community, he may very well be an insider in that community. All things being equal, yeah, being born Jewish, right, you're more likely to be at ease with fellow Jews, but all things aren't born equal. Plenty of Jews have mental health problems. So you think, let's take your average Jew. Would he feel more comfortable with someone who's born Jewish with considerable mental health problems, or someone like myself who is a sparkling exemplar of good mental health? Or would someone who's born Jewish feel more comfortable with a Jew with an active drug addiction, or myself who's emotionally sober? Would someone born Jewish feel more comfortable with someone born Jewish who has not been employed for 15 years, or a hardworking person like myself? So conversion is just one factor in determining how much you're going to fit into a community. So generally speaking, among the Orthodox Jews that I mix with, my being a convert simply doesn't come up. Now, it may very well be there in the back of their heads. They may very well say something, but I don't think I'm an obtuse person. I'm fairly aware. Now, I don't push myself forward. I don't try to take leadership roles. I'm very happy doing, very, elementary levels of volunteering. I'm happy to do the equivalent of sweeping the floor and cleaning the windows. So I'm not looking to take a leadership role. As an example, plenty of people born Jewish feel more comfortable with me than they do with the dozens of acquaintances that they have who are born Jewish. Dooovid, anything there you want to react to?
Yeah, I mean, a few things. Like, one on the list that I made for you of various things that I found surprising was that I would be able to play a unique role in the Jewish community as a half Jew, and there were certain points where it hit me, where Jews or rabbis told people, including non-Jews, that I was a half Jew, and it seemed to have a strategic role, and then that non-Jews dealt with me differently, or that the community really just didn't care that much about what I did in terms like their own kids. They would go way out of the way to that their own kids would stay religious, and like even if I broke Sabbath, like people didn't really care that much. They had lower expectations of me. We mentioned also that this Satmar Kabbalah guy used to study with older man, said intelligence is the ability to get things done. And what I mentioned, like politics is somewhat like the problem of evil, but you could consider navigating systems and local politics that, probably most of your local synagogues probably have board of directors and elections. Maybe like Chabad or a handful of them don't, but probably like private synagogues. But I would guess the majority of the synagogues you go to probably have board of directors and elections, and you could have taken that route. You could have probably ran for a position on the board of directors of your synagogue, and maybe even worked your way up to try to be president of a synagogue, and then you might have had more issues. So you say you didn't have conflict, but you didn't choose that route. And we'll go back to talking about Germany and specifically the Holocaust angle and what it means for Germans. But I think just for you specifically, is that will you as a blue-eyed Anglo man have a position of power over Jews that typically Jews want to be you? we assimilate to you, we assimilate to Anglos, and so a lot of Jews are proud of our Jewish identity, but most Jews, if we try to blend in and obscure our Jewish identity, we're going to tier Anglo. And so, at that extent, okay, you're a convert, but you're an Anglo, and especially in Hollywood, Hollywood is the most famous. There's a lot of places of Jews who assimilated Anglo. So, I think that would probably be like a trump card uh, over a lot of Jews. It's like, okay, you're part Chinese, but you're basically a pure-blooded Anglo, and that's generally what Jews are tearing to.
And you mentioned that Jews didn't give Ivanka Trump a hard time for not covering her hair, and plenty of famous Rebbitzins have not covered their hair. This is a part of Jewish observance that changes dramatically depending on time and place. You have prominent Orthodox rabbis who didn't wear a yarmulke when they would go to university, for example. So all sorts of things that we regard as an eternal part of Judaism are really contingent, like everything else, depending on certain times and certain places. Also, Jews go ahead, do
like Rodney said, situational. I mean, she was in Manhattan, where of the modern Orthodox, probably the majority don't cover their hair, as if she would have been in Brooklyn or Williamsburg. In the high 90% of Orthodox Jews cover their hair.
Right. So it depends on time and place. And Jews, even religious Jews, are incredibly pragmatic. So plenty of Orthodox Jews are willing to make accommodations with people, or willing to, see the usefulness of another Jew or a non-Jew who's not religious. So Christians that I grew up with often looked at people through an either-or prism. Either someone's a Christian or not. Either someone believes in God or they don't. But Jews are much more pragmatic. They don't see the world through a prism of, oh, does someone believe in God or not? You want to say anything about the pragmatism of Jewish life?
Yeah, and even the conversion is not based on belief. It's not really a belief test. It's a practice test, and it's a commitment to practice. There's really no question of, do you believe? It's a question of, do you commit to allegiance to the Jewish people, and do you commit to following the Jewish law for the rest of your life? And it's not really a question of belief. And yeah, I mean, like I said, the practicality and the extent of if Jews want to get ahead, someone was mentioning about the kind of reality that Arab nations treated Jews better than Christians. But the reality is, Jews wanted to be in Europe because Europe was the powerhouse, and most Jews, vast majority, even Sephardi Jews, preferred to be in Europe, even under conditions of anti-Semitism, because that was where it was at. And so saying, if the power is in the whiter community in the European nations, Jews tier towards Europe. And there's also like social activism and justice, but even a lot of people's like social justice in America is under the mantle of being white, where Jews are white and therefore have the ability to be from the majority class, power class, to administer and affect social justice. But yeah, I mean, it's a practicality, like we've said many times when we were talking more about straight Jewish law. There's two things, the reason why Jewish communities tend to blend in with their surrounding, because there's two things that trump Jewish law, and that's safety. Basically, all Jewish law could be amended for safety and getting ahead in business. Not all Jewish law could be amended for getting ahead in business, but the majority of Jewish law, besides for very strict things, could be amended for getting ahead in business. So like it's designed to be practical, like that. Judaism wants you to get ahead and succeed.
Right. I mean, it wants you to be able to support your family. So parnasa, making a living, is sacred in Judaism. The Bible is sacred. Certain times and places are sacred. That there's a holiness to life in Judaism, not just participation inside a synagogue. So yeah, there's a level of pragmatism and flexibility with Jewish law. And that's built into Jewish law, so that you have statements like the fifth volume of the Shulchan Aruch, the 15th century compendium of Jewish law. The fifth volume is common sense. And so you have Jewish law and you have commentaries on Jewish law, but Jewish law still has to be applied at different times and different places. And when those times and places change, how you apply Jewish law is going to change. So
that's universal, and saying that as an exception, that if there's straight Jewish law, like this is what you're supposed to do as a Jew, these two exceptions of safety, security, and business are universal. In any place where Jews are living, they will make exceptions to Jewish law for getting ahead in business. That's less than safety. Almost anything could be a bridge for safety. But no, I mean, that's a universal from Talmudic times, biblical times, till today, that getting ahead in business is important, and certain aspects of Jewish law, if it conflicts with getting ahead in business, because like getting ahead in business is like Jewish law. So if there's aspects of Jewish law that conflict with getting ahead in business, the Jewish law will try to make some sort of loophole or exception so that the person could get ahead in business.
But again, that's contingent. So if Jews, it all depends on what's most likely to be for the welfare of the community. So if you're living at a time and place where Jewish business success is threatening the non-Jews and causing a tremendous blowback on Jews, then there are going to be fewer accommodations made for achieving business success. So rabbis and Jewish communities take into consideration, what's going on in the wider community, what will be the repercussions of what we're doing. So success in business, that's contingent, all right? You're not going to...
secondary to security.
Yeah, security.
I don't know if it's contingent. I was saying, like, in any case...
Contingent is secondary, meaning depend upon.
Well, it's like to security. But if it's a question like, well,
not just strictly security in terms of life and death, but the welfare of the community as well, right? Sometimes the welfare of the community discourages certain, free market, acquisitions of wealth. So, for example, there are limits on setting up a business next to a same business.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I'm just making the point that it's universal in all Jewish communities around the world that you could bend Jewish law to get ahead in business. Then there's other considerations, not just saying no matter what you could bend Jewish, like you said, the security of the community, certain aspects of the community are more important than business. But getting ahead in business is also seen like the security of the community, and so things like shaving, things like changing names, certain aspects of ritual observance, education of kids, and so on and so on. That's like Haredism. Haredism are extreme, and even Haredim will make extreme exceptions to get ahead in business.
Right, but again, it depends on the community and the time and place. So a German community, German Jewish community, the Yeki community is extremely strict on ethical dealings, and if you do business in an unethical way, that community wants nothing to do with you. You're very likely to be expelled. So a proper, polite, upstanding character is absolutely essential for being part of a Yeki Jewish community. Business ethics are much less flexible among the Lithuanian crowd than, say, the Hasidic crowd. So you're much more likely to get lectures and an emphasis on business ethics in a modern Orthodox synagogue than a Hasidic synagogue. So
100%.
Yeah.
But it's like still the Yeki community will make exceptions to Jewish law to get ahead of business. I mean, you're not questioning that. You're just saying that ethics to them, they're not gonna make exceptions in ethics, but they're certainly going to make exceptions
Yes.
in ritualistic things or various other things to get ahead in business. That's universal in Judaism.
So there's a yes, as long as it doesn't act against the overall welfare of the community. So life in Judaism is very different from life just as an American, because life in Judaism is much more group centered. So the focus for the average American is on the individual and becoming all you can be as an individual. The focus as a member of the Jewish community is the welfare of the community. And that means frequently repressing or sublimating the things that you want to do for the welfare of the community, making sacrifices for the welfare of the community. And that frequently requires that you hold back on your individual preferences. Now, Ani says in the chat, can I worship idols if it gets me ahead in business? And I'll take that question seriously. I heard this joke from Orthodox rabbis. So one man who operates a gift shop calls a supplier and says, I need 1,000 crucifixes. And the supplier says, well, do you want them with or without the mamzer? Meaning, do you want them, with or without Jesus on the cross? So, yeah, there'd be plenty of Jews who've released Christmas albums or who have, some tangential or more visceral participation in idolatry and have done it to, get ahead in their career.
But yeah, like you're saying on that, straight idol worship is, there's not even an exception for security. We're supposed to choose death over that. But, what's the exact case that you have to take death for? What's the case that you could do a little bit of idol worship for security? And what's the case you could do, like a little bit of idol worship to get ahead in business? And, so the level that will be called, saying what's actually idol worship. And then putting it back, like you mentioned, the Yekis, and like I was saying, the Anglo passing. So most Yekis wouldn't consider it unethical to Anglo pass. So if you're a Yeki Jew and you go out into business and don't wear a yarmulke and give over a Anglo name that you've taken on for the purpose of business, and people don't even know you're Jewish, that would be considered fine. But doing unethical business practices like being a slumlord or like insurance fraud or something like that, like the Yekis would say absolutely not. But I mentioned like the Anglo passing, that Yeki Jews certainly would be very likely to Anglo pass.
Right. So if Yeki Jew simply means a Jew of German origin, it doesn't necessarily mean a Jew who's ever spent any time in Germany, but it's a Jew who tends to highly assimilate to the Gentile culture in which he lives, while at the same time maintaining various levels of Jewish observance, but doing it in a way that fits in with the wider society. So Yeki Jews in America tend to be strong American patriots. Yeki Jews in England tend to be strong English patriots, in addition to their Jewish commitment. So a Yeki Jew knows about baseball. A Yeki Jew can talk to you about football. A Yeki Jew feels, very comfortable in America, while a Hasidic Jew from Eastern Europe is much more likely to have, more fears, concerns, and even negative feelings about wider Gentile culture. So by and large, Jews who come from Germany towards Western Europe tend to have quite positive views of non-Jews, and Jews whose origins are Eastern Europe, so east of Germany, tend to have much more concern and fear and negative feelings about non-Jews. Anything you want to add, David?
That's the element also of the multiculturalism and Anglo passing, because the Yekis basically hinge themselves on white passing, as opposed to the Hasidim, who more hinge themselves on multiculturalism. So if you're a Hasid who kept your Yiddish name, kept your language, lives in an area where there's very few whites, and didn't assimilate, and now America's became multicultural. So say like, no, in Brooklyn, Hasidic guys feel just as comfortable with their Americanness as Yekis, because New York's a multicultural place and they're one of the accepted New Yorkers. They know the law. They know, they're on the government programs. Like I said, like the police, like you beat up an Orthodox Jew, God forbid, like, they call the police and the governor, and they have, the Shomron, and they have their official government representatives, as opposed to the Yeki community, like the secular Jewish community, largely hinged upon assimilation, and that assimilation was towards the Anglo norm, and that might even pivot back towards the the conservaphobia book of conservatism. That if you're a Yeki and you've aimed towards this conservative culture, and then you have this Hasidic Jew who's like, "What the hell are you talking about? I'm just as American as you are. The fact that you assimilated towards Anglo culture doesn't make you any more American than I am. Rashida Tlaib is my congresswoman. Who the hell is your congresswoman?"
So I like wide open. I don't have a strong opinion on what standards Jews should use vis-a-vis converts, or whether Jews should be more encouraging or more discouraging. I think it boils down to what's in the best interests of a particular Jewish community at a certain time and place. And there will be certain times, certain places for certain communities where it's very much in their interest to bring in converts, right? It makes the community stronger. There are more numbers. There's more money. There's more influence if you bring in the right type of converts. And then at other times and places, it's completely against the community's interest to bring in converts. So let me go back to this book, and in particular, I'm reading a review of this book by Barbara Steiner on conversion to Judaism in Germany after World War II. So what's generally true for all conversions, whether Judaism or any other faith, is a conversion solves a biographical problem. So for example, for me, I yearned for a path back to God, and I yearned for a path back to religion and a community and Judaism. Like, wow, this kind of makes sense to me, and it offered a path back to God and to a concrete religious community that wasn't contaminated by my complicated relationship with my father, the evangelical Christian preacher. So I developed an allergy to Christianity. I encountered Dennis Prager. He became a father-like figure for me. And so converting to Judaism solved some biographical problems. I had a path back to God that wasn't Christianity, that wasn't Islam. I had a path back to God that made sense to me. I had a path back to God that was fascinating to me. And I had a path back to God through a community in which I quickly found myself feeling very comfortable. So I tend to have an above average verbal IQ. When I join an Ashkenazi Jewish community, I'm mixing with other people with a high verbal IQ. I feel comfortable in Jewish life. It resonates with me. So what biographical problems did becoming an Orthodox Jew solve for you, Dooovid?
It's probably similar to you, where I had identity crisis, a lot of personal issues, and I needed to be recreated, and Orthodox Judaism allowed me to recreate myself in a way that I felt comfortable in a community and style. But for me, being half Jewish and having even grandfather's grandfather that was a rabbi, grandfather's father that was Orthodox, like in L.A. My grandmother's father was in L.A. and he married a secular woman and raised his kids secular, but he put on tefillin. I think his whole life, even he was born in the Ukraine, but kept on putting on tefillin, trying to be observant himself, even though he married secular and raised his kids secular. So like the Zionist dream, there was some element of returning, that I felt like I was returning to the path of my ancestors, or I was rediscovering something. But in that respect also was very similar, because I was a troubled kid in many ways and had identity issues, and didn't really feel part of anything. Maybe I was smart and had chances of getting ahead, but was kind of a loner, didn't have many friends. and Judaism provided me the structure, provided me a community to get ahead in. And, like I was mentioning, the things we've been talking about, even, like womenizing, God forbid, even among the Orthodox Jews and Hasidim, that, it's like, men are men, but, day trading, business, working out, fitness, almost anything, the Orthodox Jewish community, the Hasidic community provided me a strong network of people that appeared largely were interested in me getting ahead.
Yeah, and back to this book review here. It says that solving a biographical problem does not imply a deficient personality structure because converting to Judaism requires psychic stability. So I remember I had a girlfriend who kind of took it on herself. She was not Jewish, she was Filipina, and she took it on herself to start her conversion to Judaism. And the rabbis picked up that there was something a little off about her. And so they made it a requirement very quickly to go to psychotherapy. And so it's easy to become attracted to Judaism from, all sorts of psychic disturbances. But to actually pull off a conversion to Judaism, it requires that you be psychically strong, right? You're not going to pull it off if you're crazy. Any thoughts on that, Dooovid?
Well, there's different types of crazy, and like I'm kind of crazy, but like in a stable, like I said, that there's not really that many beliefs tests. It's more practice tests, and following the law, commitment to the community. So you could believe crazy things. You could even occasionally have outbursts about the crazy things that you believe, but it's more action. So if you have behavioral problems, I think that would be more problematic than beliefs or even occasional verbal outbreaks.
I'm thinking about one girl, a couple of women I know who are alcoholics, and that they seemingly did everything right, but their alcoholism after years of going through the conversion program, their alcoholism just blew up their possibilities of converting. Sorry, Dooovid, I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's good you did. And say, okay, so, I have psychological issues. Let's say you're, you're what is it, psychotic or
narcissistic.
You're narcissistic or I'm saying that that's a psychological disorder that could cause behavioral problems, but largely we could still control our behavior even though we have psychological problems. So they put that, I think it's more behavioral problems that in having psychological craziness might even help you converting to Judaism, because you probably got to believe something crazy to go through it, to switch your life system, and to accept. Even though you don't have to take a belief test on the Jewish belief system, that that's the Jewish belief system. And so either do you really believe it, or can you make yourself believe it? So being a little crazy might even help, as long as it doesn't cause behavioral problems, because the community's eyes are on you, and you're going to need extreme levels of self-control to control your behavior. That if you have behavioral outbursts, you're just not going to be able to make the cut. You're not going to be able to, be an Orthodox Jew. There's too, the community level of awareness of what you're doing is too strong to allow a severe behavioral disorder.
Right. So one issue that we have right now is that the conception of mental illness is just so broad that it's hard to get your hands on it. So I want to provide a metaphor for mental health and mental illness that I read about. I think it's a very powerful one. So my wrist does everything that I need my wrist to do. I can pick up a pen, I can do push-ups, I can do pull-ups, I can carry 50-pound bags of concrete. Like, my wrist is perfectly healthy, right? There's no normal part of life that my wrist is not up to handling. And so too, if your emotional life is congruent with reality, if you're able to deal with, you know, good things happening and bad things happening, but you can keep on trucking, then you're mentally healthy, no matter the various disorders that you may have, no matter the various neuroses you may have, if you are adaptive to life. So if you feel sad, it doesn't mean you take a week off work. So that's what I mean by mental health. And it does require a strong degree of mental strength to make it through a conversion process, because it's not something you do primarily on your own. It's something you primarily do with other people. You have to essentially win the approval of the community and people who get to know you really well. So this book review notes that converting to Judaism requires psychic stability. Now, here's a little bit more from the book review. So, becoming Jewish in Germany, does that reveal something deeper about the convert? Is that a problem that people are solving by say, conversion? And different people in different places, all right, they're going to have different incentives to make such a dramatic shift. So much of conversion is just pragmatic. People have a Jewish spouse, or they have some Jewish ancestry, and it's a very pragmatic thing. Now, other people are on an ideological journey. Now, people who are on an ideological journey, such as me, all right, I had a desperate need for meaning that Judaism met. And people who have a desperate need for meaning, they're trouble. Because if you have normal relations with other people, you're not going to have a desperate need for meaning, because you will get your meaning from your spouse, from your family, from your kids, from your friends, from your community, from your co-workers, from your colleagues. That's the normal way to get meaning in your life, through your relationships with other people. But if you don't have satisfying relationships with other people, then you have this huge, desperate hunger for meaning, because just dealing with reality, your life isn't working. And so you need some kind of transcendent purpose that redeems your suffering that comes from not being able to connect normally with other people. Any thoughts on the desperate need for meaning, and how that's, I see it as a tip-off of a lack of satisfying relationships, Dooovid?
Yeah, that's probably accurate. I mean, there could be people that are relatively normal and successful that fall into a meaning crisis and could come onto Judaism. It doesn't, have to be disastrous. And even think, like my life was relatively on track. I didn't have like a disaster. Like I had an existential crisis. I was still accepted into a good university, and had a network and good grades, and I didn't have any serious problems. I had an existential meaning crisis, and found my answers in Judaism. I was thinking, a few things, and Judaism, you have to be able to constantly show your face, and especially if you're a male, and that means coming to minyan. And okay, like I've been doing a lot of things, but most of the time, or really all of the time, I was able to go to minyan, go to synagogue, and learn. Like you were mentioning, porn addicts, God forbid, is like, well, can you still go to minyan, put on tefillin, and show up to learning daf yomi? And if the behavior, if you're still able to show your face to community, usually you could work with the leadership and the rabbi, and they'll try to help you. I remember in your book, God forbid, I think you said it was the Aisha Torah. I don't know if it was, God forbid, that rabbi from that other woman's book who confiscated your tefillin. But even in your time with your blog or whatever, you were still able to show your face, put on tefillin, go to daf yomi, seriously study the daf. And so if other people no, Luke Ford, he's doing stuff that is not acceptable, but you would be able to work that out with the rabbi and the community leaders. And that's what we said about detractors. They would say, okay, I got my problems, but I'm talking with the rabbi and the leadership and the president of the synagogue, and we have an understanding. And there might be other people in the synagogue that aren't happy with that understanding. Like, no, that guy's just bad. I don't know why the rabbi and the leadership are willing to work together with them. And I hate it, every time he walks into here, I just hate it, and I'm a difficult person towards him. But at the same time, like, usually the community leadership, as long as you're able to show your face, and it's like, well, he davened, he put on tefillin today, he was able to show his face. And I think I mentioned this a few times, this other Hasidic rabbi, he said about America in general, but think in Judaism, like the communal aspect, normal means being able to hide your problems. So as long as you could show up to the communal events and hide your problems, the community leadership will work together with you and try to help you. And there'll be some talebearers who will tell everybody and know about your problems. But generally, you're still normal if you could hide your problems. And so, like, the behavioral aspect of not being able to hide your problems, that's going to be too much. If you can't show up, or if showing up, you can't show up and hide your problems, then you might be.
Okay, you're repeating. I got that. So, but when you had that desperate need for meaning, I'm going to wager you didn't have close friends at that time. You were functional, you were educated, you were doing many things right, but you didn't have close friends who loved you and who you loved, or I would suspect you would not have had that desperate need for meaning. I mean, feel free to tell me I'm wrong.
Oh yeah, I was throwing in all that other stuff, and so yeah, definitely. Like I didn't really have any friends, and I had a disconnect with my family, but I didn't have any specific issues. Like, I was a good student. I was relatively overachiever. I almost got into, I'd applied to Harvard and MIT. I was doing good at University of Michigan. I had normal, relatively social relations, but no, I didn't have any close friends. I felt completely disconnected from everything. It was more an existential lack of meaning. I just found no meaning in anything. I was almost suicidal, where just like, life is meaningless. I should just kill myself, God forbid. And it was Judaism that I found meaning in, and maybe because I was a little bit crazy, that I could say, well, maybe this is actually true. So it wasn't just like a stability structure or a ability for me to reinvent myself as a new person. In my own head, even today, like, I still think that this stuff might actually be true.
Yeah, and another factor here is that everybody needs things that they're good at. And so people who, for example, don't graduate from college or a prestigious college, or don't have a prestigious job, or don't have a prestigious hobby, or don't have any prestige in their life, they can often get a feeling of importance by a very strong commitment to religion. So let's say you convert to Orthodox Judaism, or you grow in your Jewish observance, you can play an important role in your synagogue. You can be the guy who's there every morning for Daf Yomi. You can be the guy who's there every morning and evening for Minyan. And so much of what drives people into religion is just that very human need for an opportunity to shine, for a place to be important, for a place where you play a substantial role, where even some people look up to you. So some people are movie directors, and so they don't need to feel important at synagogue. And other people are prestigious professors. Other people run a corporation. But many people who don't have anything where they are standing out in life, they can find a way to stand out at synagogue and take on a volunteer position, or just be, an assistant to the rabbi, show up to davening, to prayers, and to Torah classes, and become an important part of the synagogue, and that fills the human need for importance. Any thoughts on that, Dooovid?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I was, before I became, Jewish, or born again Jewish, I wasn't important to anybody. My parents, were workaholics, and they pushed me to achieve, but largely they're just workaholics, and they wanted to see my grades or updates on my achievements. And like, I knew people, but I wasn't that popular. I never got invited to parties or event. I wasn't important to anybody. And so even University of Michigan, where before I went to Israel, like, they needed me for a minyan. God forbid, University of Michigan has like over 4,000 Jewish students, over like 2,000 Jewish men, but they could hardly get a minyan. So, even they had like two rabbis, a Chabad rabbi and a Hillel rabbi, and but they needed me for a minyan. Like literally, like this guy even picked me up at my dormitory, like upperclassmen, because like literally I was number 10. But to the extent like they needed me. And then when I was in went to Israel in Brooklyn, I was always needed. Just I had regular skills. Maybe like okay, a chashuv, a little bit educated from so as they took higher birth from a upper middle class family. I knew how to do a bunch of things. Speak English, know how to write, and so in Israel, I was recruited. Even big rabbis and yeshivas and various people recruited me, and they wanted me to study in their yeshivas and pray in their shuls and be part of their movements. And I was in New York. I was constantly being recruited, and I was being asked things. So like we've argued about this many times, like beggar culture, but like being begged for money, being asked for rides, for small favors. Like as a kid, no one ever asked me for anything. Like even to just asking for money, it was unheard of. Even if I had money to give, as a kid, maybe less than 5 times before I was 18 did someone ask me for money, or just culturally, it wasn't the type thing. People didn't ask each other for things. And so being part of the Jewish community, it's very easy to feel important and be needed, and to constantly have people reaching out to you.
Yeah, I mean, the look of pleasure on your rabbi's face when you walk into his class, or when you attend minyan, or not just the rabbi, but other people, that look of pleasure and joy that people have when they see you, that's incredibly powerful. That's incredibly intoxicating. Like to go to a place where everybody knows your name and where they're always glad you came. I mean, that's what people want. Do you want to talk about that element?
Yeah, and you're saying it wasn't like that in the secular world. Like University of Michigan, your prep school, public school. Maybe I had a handful of friends that were like sit next to me in class, or would occasionally invite me to social events, or periods of time where I basically hung just had one or two friends and would hang out with them day after day after school. But no, I mean, no one was ever glad I showed up. So I get in trouble, like they took attendance, yeah, but no one was ever glad I showed up to anything. And God forbid, I think the secular world's a cold, impersonal place. It's not communal. You could develop friendships and relationships, but generally, uh, like no one's ever glad you come, and they're not so warm or inviting, and it's competitive.
But when you go to synagogue, it's very likely that the rabbi will light up when he sees you. He will be happy to see you, and that's an intoxicating feeling. There will likely be people there who know your name, and they're glad to see you. I mean, that feels really good, right?
Definitely. I mean, I would think, even though, okay, my local Young Israel or Orthodox synagogues, like I try to be on good behavior and not cause any problems, and various things. Maybe like there's a certain tire, people don't really like me, and there's always the element of difficult social interactions. But like, yeah, almost definitely, if I went to any of these local synagogues, even in Brooklyn, like the rabbi himself would probably come over and say, "Oh, how's it going? How you been? If there's anything you need, let me know." At least to a minimal extent. And most of the people, like I was given the example of like needing $20. God forbid, keep yourself cool. But like, yeah, like there's probably, like it'd be, like you said, like they like, oh, like how come you haven't been coming to synagogue? And like we're glad you're here. Uh, and there would be kiddush and kiddush club. Someone might invite me to their house for a Sabbath meal. The rabbi, probably want to make sure everything's all right, and try to get me more involved. And that was definitely because I was somewhat like an elite, I guess, like, so like Orthodox community was like, like social economically a step down, saying like, okay, I live in a wealthier suburb than the Orthodox community. I was accepted into the best schools, even in New York. Um, that there's a certain element that, but it's just a welcoming, friendly community, and it's like, no, we need you,
Yeah.
the
I
community.
went back to Australia. I got invited to rabbis' homes for meals. I got invited to Jewish events. People picked me up to take me bowling. I mean, it's a very warm community. Like, Jews tend to be very warm, and at the outside world, it's frequently very cold. I mean, making your way in the world today, it takes everything you've got. I mean, taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. I mean, wouldn't you like to get away? Think about all those nights when you've got no lights, the check is in the mail, and your little angel hung the cat up by its tail, and your third fiance didn't show. Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You want to be where you can see our troubles are all the same. You want to be where everybody knows your name. I mean, you roll out of bed, Mr. Coffee's dead, the morning's looking bright, and your shrink ran off to Europe and didn't even write, and your husband wants to be a girl. Well, be glad there's one place in the world where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You want to go where people know that people are all the same. You want to go where everybody knows your name. So back.
Portnoy is Jewish. The author of that song is Jewish. Portnoy, I forget his first name. It was a good song. I looked into it, and think that it's certainly Jewish authored. But definitely there could be, okay, like okay, like they're not necessarily gonna say, well, we'll put you into leadership. We're gonna set you up with our most beautiful girl, but certainly you're needed, and there's gonna be a task for you, and you're gonna be included at least the minimal standard, like even if it's overflow synagogue, like that you stand, or you're gonna get you a seat. There's gonna be enough food for you at the kiddush. If they know you're coming, there's you're going to be fed. A certain minimum standard safety net is there for you, and even in terms of shidduch, like they might not have the girl you want to set you up with, but they'll probably make an effort to set you up. And employment, they might not have the job that you want, but someone will probably have employment for you. And God forbid, the secular world's a cold, harsh place. There's con men in the Jewish community, but the Jewish community has a safety factor too, like you were mentioning, like Manhattan, and like rape, and thievery, and con men. Like bad things happen to people. You could you go out into the world and ask for help, or go to a bar, regular places, even university. People take advantage of you. There's levels of people taking advantage of you in the Jewish community, but it's like, no, I mean, generally they're going to protect you from that. And so that structure there, I'd never been part of it, and it felt good. And also, like, as a venue to give back, it feels good to be a good person and help other people, especially if you're part of the group strategy. So, like, and I'm a Jew now, and I'm helping out the Jewish community, and that's helping out myself, because I know that this community, that I might be doing well now, and I'm giving to the community. But if I was in a bad situation, the community would take care of me. Something like OHEL, or the soup kitchen, or all these various things that you're saying. Like, God forbid, I would never want to be on the dole of the Orthodox Jewish community. But think like, well, it's going to be there for me. I'm glad, and I'm happy to give to something that I'm part of. And you could try to find that in the secular world, like what Hinduism or another religion, a volunteer group, camaraderie. Like sometimes a group of friends, like at a bar, you could be there for somebody. Like even like talking like strategies to being promiscuous and helping a person out with their strategy, and so there is camaraderie and a thing of people being there for you, but not the same way as like a religious group like that, especially Orthodox Judaism, which is probably one of the strongest identities in the world.
Right. So when I've moved to a new Jewish community, usually there's someone who takes me aside and says, "What do you need? Do you need a job? Do you need an apartment? Do you need a car? Do you need a doctor? Like, what do you need? We'll help you out." And that's very common. I mean, or if you're moving from your community, you can go to Minion and say, "Hey, I've got a car that I need to get rid of." So people really pitch in to help out. Back to this article in JTA. The headline is, "Too many Germans converting to Judaism. The debate is roiling in Germany's Jewish community." And the cantor who wrote the controversial article says, "I know that no one should talk about the gior," meaning the convert. So she's citing Jewish laws frowning on differentiating between converts and people who are born Jewish. But again, Jewish law is incredibly pragmatic. Right. If it's important to talk about differences between people who convert and people who are born Jewish, the Jewish community is not going to shut that down. So many of these teachings, it's very hard to legislate ethics. All right. So you've got a lot of ethical teachings in Judaism, such as, don't remind a convert that he is a convert. But these are sermons. These are homiletics. They're not really halakha in the normal sense, like halakha meaning Jewish law, like keep the Sabbath, keep kosher. So Jewish teachings about ethics are overwhelmingly of the homiletical variety, meaning a story. And so if you get a story saying don't remind the convert that he's a convert, that's not the same as a halakha that you can't eat a pig. Obviously, there's a time and a place where discussing conversion and converts and people born Jewish are completely appropriate. So, Dooovid, you want to say anything?
Yeah, I mean, specifically the case in Germany where me and you may have been seeking meaning and running away from problems in our born biological identity. But the German case is different, in the sense that they're running away from Germanness, and specifically from being the perpetrators of the Holocaust to the victims of the Holocaust. So the nature of this article is taking a different turn. And I think it's also mentioning that it appeared that there had really been a huge amount of conversion there, and so I don't know the exact numbers. I looked up the book. I couldn't find it. I actually found it a free copy online in German, but not in English. So I don't know the numbers, but it appeared that they're saying it was pretty substantial in some of these congregations. Even like the downtown synagogue. Now at this point that they've went liberal, there's a huge element of people that aren't halakhically Jewish. There's a huge amount of people that have done liberal conversions. And if you went to the synagogue on a given period, now that they've dumped minyan or the typical things that Orthodox Jews do, probably less than half of the people there are halakhically Jewish, and of those that aren't, maybe half of those have done some sort of conversion process, and so there's going to be like a level, like I'm actually a biological Jew, and like I should have more weight or bearing in this community. And then if you're looking at the direction, like, well, what practical implication does that have? And there might have been like, well, I wanted kind of a normal surrounding. I didn't want to be caught up with a whole bunch of Jews. That's why we invited all these goyim there. But at a certain point, there's going to be group strategy, and it's going to become questionable for the community, especially in Germany, where you have what does it mean to be German and a perpetrator of the Holocaust,
right?
Versus
let me jump in. So I think something that many people don't understand, that when you're converting to Judaism, you're primarily converting to a tribe, not a religion. So if Judaism was primarily a religion, then the more converts, the better, right? But Judaism is not primarily a religion. Judaism is primarily a people. It is primarily a tribe. When you have a tribe, bringing in additions to the tribe is not necessarily in the tribe's best interest. So tribes throughout history have brought in outsiders and essentially adopted them into the tribe and mentored them into the tribe, and these outsiders have become insiders and successfully assimilated into the tribe. But Judaism is not Christianity without Jesus, right? Christianity is a religion where the more converts, the better. But Judaism definitely does not follow that strategy. It's primarily about what is best for the people, meaning Jews, the people of Israel. It's not primarily about, saving souls and just getting more and more numbers into your congregation. So going back to this German cantor, she writes, the very large number of new Jews has led to a considerable change in Jewish life in Germany. In some services and during some speeches, I feel more reminded of an interreligious event than of the visit to the synagogue I've been familiar with since childhood. Well, she's talking here about Reform synagogues. Obviously, you're not going to find many interreligious events at Orthodox synagogues. I mean, that's very rare, and that's only going to happen in modern Orthodox synagogues. So this is an article overwhelmingly about non-Orthodox conversion to Judaism. Anything you want to add, Dooovid?
Yeah, but if we're mentioning I was useful to the community because I had more social economic status than the average Orthodox Jew. And so probably Germans have more social economic status than the average Orthodox Jew. So if it's here in America, in Metro Detroit, your average Orthodox Jew, even though they don't go to university, may not even have like an official high school diploma, probably have more social economic status than African Americans, but they have less social economic status than than suburban whites or educated whites. So probably the case with the Germans has some element like that, and hence why they're able to raise to leadership. And then the question about interfaith or representation. So like a lot of times, like Orthodox Jews don't do interfaith. They don't care about that. They don't really have this representation. They might have community liaisons that deal with certain aspects, but it's more a secular thing. So it's a little bit of a joke that it's the secular community that's so concerned about this, that they're fake converts, or their numbers in their social clubs, and then they're looking that their social clubs, like the Reform here in America, where at this point less than like half of the Reform are halakhically Jewish anyways. They allowed patrilineal descent and minimized the standards of conversion. And that's why mentioned also that of the people that do Orthodox conversion, that's probably less than 10% of conversions, because Orthodox conversion is extremely difficult. It's grueling. You basically have to give everything over to it and make a lifelong commitment, as opposed to lesser levels of conversion. You could kind of just take like a 6-week course and have a minimal allegiance to a local synagogue of people that don't do anything really that Jewish, and it's kind of just like joining a country club. And so probably this case in Germany is like that. But at the same time, because Jews are a minority and most Orthodox Jews are insular, that you could represent the Jewish community. So you could take a 6-week course and join like a Reform social Jewish JCC social club, and be Jewish and start representing Judaism in interfaith or to non-Jews, or talking about the Holocaust and various things. So I think in this case that's probably more the case, and especially in Germany, with the nature of the Holocaust, where you have all these kind of like social club Jews, Germans, that are questionably Jewish, and now they're representing the Jewish community to non-Jews. And like even in LA, where there's like 500,000 Jews and a sizable Jewish community, there's still probably 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4 people in LA probably don't really know any Jews that well. So you could convert to Judaism, even though there's 500,000, Jews within near vicinity of you, and all of a sudden you're representing yourself to the two non-Jews as like a leader in the Jewish community.
Okay, I want to deal with a comment in the chat by Glib Medley. He says, some people find meaning in tearing up a roll of toilet paper before the sun goes down on Fridays. No, you misunderstand what's really going on. The reason that some people find meaning in observing the laws of the Sabbath, including the law of not tearing things, so that they therefore prepare for the Sabbath by tearing up sheets of toilet paper so that they don't have to get perforated on the Sabbath. The meaning comes from the signal that this gives to yourself and to others that you're a part of a concrete community of flesh and blood. If nobody knew that you were tearing up toilet paper before Shabbat, if you weren't part of a community of people who do this, then you wouldn't find meaning in it. Even God, all right? God only has meaning to the extent that you make that concrete through participation with other people in reaching out to God or celebrating God or following God's will. So I primarily get meaning from reading books because I know I'll have the opportunity to share it with you and to share it with my friends. If I didn't get to talk about the books I read with other people, reading those books would have about, 40%, 30% of the meaning. So meaning comes from other people. So if you get meaning from doing a ritual, it's not the ritual that's giving you the meaning. It is the connection with other people that gives you the meaning. So people can use religion to connect with other people. People can use a dog park to connect with other people. People can use live streaming. And Glib Medley says, if you can't get a Jewish wife, it's all rather absurd. Well, if you connect with other people, it's not rather absurd, right? I have good friends in the Orthodox Jewish community with whom I spend a great deal of my spare time, with whom I have the most intense, important conversations of my week with friends from various Orthodox synagogues. That's where my life revolves, right? My social circle within the Orthodox Jewish community, that is the burning core of my life, and that's there, and that works, and that keeps me warm, even though I don't have a wife. So human connection is absurd and pointless if you don't have a wife. That's nonsense, right? We need friends. We need other people. We need opportunities to be of service to other people. We need other people to get feedback. We need other people to share a common cause with. And oh my God, I failed the first commandment. Oh my God. All right. So there's a type of personality that Glib Medley is embodying right now where they just feel driven to knock down something that gives other people pleasure and meaning. Right. And so if going to a dog park gives you pleasure and meaning, don't allow people to knock that down. There is nobody, all right? There's nobody from whom you can't take a certain angle and find failures in their life, all right? Everybody has failures. Everybody has vulnerabilities. Everybody you can point a finger and say, look, you failed here at this fundamental task of being human. Everybody fails at some aspect of being human. Everybody looks up at the ceiling of their life and sees a missing tile. Now, certain people will fixate on that missing tile, not just their own missing tile, but they will feel, obliged to point it out to you as like, oh, how dare you be happy? How dare you find meaning and sustenance in this particular community or activity? Don't you realize that you failed on this fundamental task of being human, right? Everybody fails at the fundamental task of being human in this way or that way. Everybody has gaping wounds inside them. The rabbi with 12 children has gaping wounds inside of himself. The rabbi with 12 kids and a beautiful wife and a flourishing career and friends and professional prestige, he has deep wounds because there are fundamental parts of being human that even he fails at. We never get to graduate from being human. We never become invulnerable to life. We never, hit, every single option and just, get it all lined up. So you can always figure out a reason why, oh, you shouldn't be taking pleasure in your job because someone else is doing the same job that you're doing and they make 40% more money than you. How dare you feel pleasure at your job? How dare you have a sense of pride? How dare you get purpose and meaning and human connection and friendship and feel happy, belonging to a particular professional community when you're not even number one, you're not even in the top 20%, you're just a schlepper. How dare you be happy? That really bugs me that you're happy, because I can see from the outside that there are 15 reasons why you should not be happy. I can list off right now 7 things that you should feel thoroughly ashamed of. How dare you stand up and say you find purpose and meaning and happiness in this activity or with this connection or with this group or following this procedure or obeying these protocols? How dare you be happy? Can't you see that there are 7 things wrong with you that I can list right now, that every group that you belong to? Guess what? There are economists who are not particularly good at math. There are porn stars who can't give a good hand job. There are, professional athletes who, struggle with this or that aspect of their profession. So nobody ever graduates from vulnerability. Dooovid, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that some of the stuff has been well studied, and I largely agree. And as a convert or outsider, Baal Tshuva, you could become a full member of the Orthodox community, prominent, purposeful. But in terms of the internal community leadership, it would be pretty rare for there to be, a convert or even a Baal Tshuva. And because it is tribal, there's the element of large families. So, Yichus lineage is extremely important. Most rabbis, even modern Orthodox rabbis, come from rabbinic families, have an impressive lineage of rabbis. A lot of times, even modern Orthodox leaders like president of congregations, organizations, come from extremely large extended families and have connection into the Orthodox community. So maybe a Baal Tshuva could become a head of the AJC, but like the local federation or various Jewish power, most of those people come from large extended family networks, and because it's tribal, they're almost seen as a representative of their family. And also the nature of Jewish communal structure is that most events, people are constantly going to weddings and bar mitzvahs and family events, and family shows up. So, if you're in LA in the Orthodox community and you have 400, second, third cousins, and when you make a wedding, you instantly have 200 people. Or if you make so Luke, you might, if you got married, I'm sure it'd be a great blessing and lots of people would come to synagogue, but you're not going to have 100 people that are your cousins that are going to come and automatically going to come because they're your relatives, and that's part of being tribal. And living in Brooklyn or having been in the Black Hat Orthodox system, there's the marriage dynamics. So a large aspect of Judaism focuses on continuity, education, shidduchim, and generally converts marry other converts, and even second generation, the kids of converts marry the kids of other converts, or Bali Tshuva, or various things. And I remember in Israel, at Or Samek, there was Rabbi Asher Wade, who became Hasidic and was a former German Christian minister, and he became a semi-prominent rabbi, but is always the former Christian minister, the convert, and his kids may have intermarried within the community, but it take probably 2 or 3 generations till it would be normalized that you would have a prominent, like you're saying, that there would be a Jewish Ford, that if you had kids, likely your kids would marry the kids of a Baal Tshuva or modern Orthodox or other convert, and maybe your grandkids could rise up to being a position of power or being a rabbi, and it'd probably even be great grandkids. You'd be probably looking at the third generation. So, the aspect of lineage and marriage and internal representation of leaders being representative of larger family structures is inescapable. So, like, Glib's point in that, like, there is that aspect of the community, but it doesn't mean that you're not a full part of the community. It just means that leadership is tribal, and in order to be a leader in the Jewish community, generally you have to be a prominent leading member of a large extended family network. And as a convert, that will take multiple generations.
Right. Thanks, Dooovid. I'm going to move on for tonight. Thanks for coming by.
Yeah, great. Interesting talk, and blessings.
Yeah, blessings to you. So this is something that I work with, and if you're normal, you work with this too. You get to choose where you put your attention. So sometimes I stand up here and I run out of passion. I run out of energy. I think, God, this is a pointless stream. I'm not contributing anything. All I'm doing is being a content taker rather than a content maker. And I'm not energized every time I get off a live stream. I don't finish a live stream every time go, oh yeah, what a powerful show. Boy, 40, you really, just knocked it out of the park on that show. So when I say run out of energy, run out of drive, or just become frustrated with the stream and I shut it down, like, where do I go from there? And one place I go is, am I doing too much live streaming? So you'll notice reasonably often I'll take 3 days a week, 10 days just completely off from live streaming. So I think, what the hell am I doing? Are there better ways that I could spend my time? Or I think about, are there better ways that I could do the show? And, as I participate in life, I mess things up. I say the wrong thing. I do the wrong thing. I try to join a conversation where I'm not wanted. Or I think, oh my God, I'm a bachelor. I've never been able to sustain a relationship longer than a year. So I have all these opportunities to feel bad. I don't know about you, but I think back on the course of my life, and there's so many ugly things that I've done. There's so many gratuitously cruel things that I've done. There's so many shameful and embarrassing things that I've done. Just the way I've conducted myself for years on end. There's just, ugh. But I don't want to live there. I adopted certain attitudes that seem to be working for me. So, for example, I don't tend to regret the past. So you be the judge. You watch this show for 2, 3, 5, 6 years. I don't spend time regretting the past. That's relatively a minor role in my life. Because I have adopted the attitude that I heard or read somewhere, or I just developed it, that given who I was at a particular point of time, I could not have operated differently, that I was doing the best I could at that time to meet my needs, and those were all the tools that I had, and therefore I made those embarrassing choices. And that's an attitude that really helps me. Or sometimes there are certain women that I am highly attracted to, and I may talk to one, and it becomes very evident very quickly that she has no interest in me. So as soon as I detect that, I try to get the hell out of that conversation, because it's dispiriting. And so I can think about that. I can think about one woman in particular who's very smart, very funny, very pretty, just my type. And if I think about her for very long, I get sad. So I choose not to think about her very long. Like, intermittently, thoughts of her may come to mind, and then I choose to put my attention elsewhere. So I don't focus on, oh, I'm not with this woman that I want right now, and I don't focus on what I don't have in my life, and I don't focus on, oh, I'm not eating out at the most fancy restaurants. I don't focus on, oh, I wasn't invited to that cool party. I focus on my God, I love all the time that I have to read books. So yesterday, Labor Day, what did I do? It was stinking hot outside, and I read a book by Ronnie Goldman, his Critical Theory of Academia. So it took me about 5 hours, and I powered through about 220 densely packed pages of his Critical Theory of Academia. And that was how I spent my day, and I enjoyed it. I took notes. I added some key excerpts to my blog. I highlighted some passages that I may want to revisit on a future stream. And the primary meaning that I get from reading a book is not reading the book in and of itself, just helping develop my understanding of life. The primary meaning I get out of reading a book is that I get to share it with you, and with you over there, and with my friend at synagogue, and my friend at the coffee house, and my friend at the dog park, and my friend at the dental office, and my friend in this 12-step program, and my friends in that 12-step program. So synagogue and 12-step programs, and people from the dog park, and people from the bar down the road where I spend time, I take them with me, right? I'm thinking about them often when I'm getting up at 4 a.m. It's not infrequently that I wake up at 4 a.m. and I'm excited. As long as I've had sufficient sleep, I'm excited to get up at 4 a.m. because it gives me 2 more hours of life, right? 2 more hours to read books, 2 more hours to exercise, 2 more hours to write in my journal, 2 more hours to do a live stream or to prepare a live stream. And so I keep my thinking, generally speaking, on what it is that I'm doing that I enjoy and that I want to do. So I enjoy reading Thomas Hobbes and understanding more about his life and understanding more about his classic work, Leviathan. When I deal with difficult people, I enjoy going through videos on YouTube on how to deal with difficult people, how to classify difficult people, how to develop effective strategies for interacting with difficult people. I love becoming more competent at life by reading a book, reading an article, watching a video, listening to a podcast, and I come into this with a problem, then I get a solution. It's like, yes, I feel good. I feel good when I write a blog post that I like to read. So occasionally I'll be watching a movie or a TV show or reading a book, and it'll inspire, I want to blog about this. And so I start blogging, and then I go read it in my browser, and it's like, oh, this is good. Right? I get pleasure from writing. I get pleasure from doing many live streams. Some live streams, I think, oh, what the hell am I doing here, 40? This is a waste. 40, you just turned into a content taker rather than a content maker. What the hell, bro? Or, oh, you let this person talk too much, or you didn't allow this person to talk enough, or you didn't, take that person's question with the seriousness that it deserved, and on the other hand, you took that person's comment with too much seriousness. So keeping tuned in to certain channels, right? Keeping tuned into a focus of, what I am grateful for, what I am good at, what makes me feel alive and thriving, and sitting back or standing up. I do a lot of my reading standing up or lying back and reading a book. That makes me happy. Now, I could spend that time introspecting about what I'm missing in life, but maybe you think, oh, I'm just lying to you. I'm just putting on this performance, and as soon as the show goes off, I crawl into a ball and cry myself to sleep. But the 40 you get on the live stream is a little amped up, version of 40 through the rest of my life. I'm a pretty happy guy about 90% of the time. I'm, average about probably 9% of the time, and 1% of the time I'm actively unhappy, particularly when I experience some, dire form of loss. When that, just occasionally, people, events, circumstances, losses, they just take control of my prefrontal cortex. I can't Alexander technique my way out of it. I can't meditate my way out of it. I can't journal my way out of it. I can't, read a book out of it. sometimes, events, losses, people, will preoccupy my prefrontal cortex. But most of the time, life as I experience, I get to choose what channel I tune into. And so I choose to tune into the channel of love. There are a lot of people in my life who I love. I get to tune into the channel of, intellectual excitement. And that's a happy place to be. I get to tune into the channel of emotional sobriety. And that may mean prayer, it may mean meditation, it may mean attending a 12-step meeting, it may mean sponsoring people, it may mean reaching out to people, it may mean picking up the big book like I did yesterday. I picked up the big book, and whenever there was a sentence or a phrase that spoke to me, I set it aside and just started journaling about why that phrase had so much meaning for me. So I choose to keep my conscious mind focused on those activities in life that resonate with me, that make me happy, that make me feel good, that make me feel excited, that provide warmth for my soul, for my neshama, and that I can then share it with other people. And when I think about the stupid things I've done and the ugly things I've done and the dumb things I've done, I take an attitude to that. I take the attitude of, one, I could not have acted differently given who I was at the time, and two, I'm going to use that to be of service, right? Because there are other people who've done similarly stupid things as me, right? And some of them, a few, I'm going to be able to help, right? I'm not so naive that here I am speaking to this, intoxicating crowd of 17 live people. I'm not so stupid of thinking, I'm changing 17 lives right now. But I think the odds are that 1, 2, 3 people are going to get some benefit from this live stream, that I'll run into somebody who's having a problem that I've struggled with, and I can use my experience, I can use my humiliation, I can use my failure, and I can just share my experience, strength, and hope. I don't have to preach at anyone. I don't have to say, here's the holy book, and if you just read chapter 3 of this holy book, that provides all the answers that you need. Here's the guru. If you just check out this guru, if you just do this 17-point procedure, you'll solve your problem. No, I could just share, okay, I had a problem similar to that. My God, it completely knocked me on my ass. I can't believe what a total tool I was and what a fool I was. And what I learned from the experience was XYZ. And now when I encounter similar situations, I'm able to navigate them. And if it's an appropriate interaction where the person's, paying attention to me, they're not just like tuning out and their body language is turned away from me. And it's like, oh, hell, I'm getting lectured at right now. Right? As soon as I pick that up, I stop. All right. If I'm not getting that immediate feedback that someone's tuning in, I stop. But there are occasions when I say something that's useful. Some people have gotten benefit from the Fisher-Wallace device. Some people have gotten benefit from beef organ capsules. Some people have gotten benefit from a 5-minute meditation practice. Some people have gotten benefit from a 12-step program that I may have mentioned. Some people have gotten benefit from reading a book that I've mentioned. Some people have gotten benefit from taking up the Alexander technique. Some people find a particular idea, such as no need to regret the past, because given who I was at the time, I could not have acted differently. I didn't have enough tools to deal appropriately with the situation. Some people find that a useful insight. So it's not a matter of being the ascendant guru. It's a matter of living a life that is consonant with the people who I like, getting along with other people, realizing when there's a time to speak up and when there's a time to be silent, having moderate opportunities to help other people, having opportunities to do the things that I find interesting and stimulating and even exciting that aren't bad for me. All right. A lot of forms of excitement are really bad for me. So if I took up sports betting, that would be really bad for me. If I tried to live the pickup artist lifestyle, that would be really bad for me. If I tried to sleep with every woman I could who was above a 5, that would be really bad for me. But there are things that I can do, Like Elliot Blatt talked about the true crime documentary. Watching a true crime documentary late at night when you can't sleep, that's 1,000 times better than watching pornography, right? You still get the excitement, right? You get the distraction, right? Distraction sometimes gets a bad name. Distraction is frequently adaptive, right? Sometimes distraction's maladaptive, right? If you should be doing your job and instead you're being distracted by playing some stupid game on your phone, that's maladaptive distraction. But my day typically starts about 5 a.m., right? My day typically is composed of about an hour of spiritual practice, about an hour of sponsoring, about an hour of exercise, of about 2 hours or so of reading books, about 8 hours of work. And then after I've done all those good things, come 7 p.m., 8 p.m., I'll jump on my exercise bike or I'll go out to an event. But it's now 40 time, right? I've done good things. I've been of service for other people. I've done the exercises I need to do to stay in shape. I've done the exercises I need to do to stay spiritually aligned. Right? I have met my obligations to other people. I have contributed. I have given of myself. I have stepped up to the plate. And now it's 40 time.